Multinationals are splitting energy procurement strategies. Why multinational companies are splitting energy procurement strategies by region. Corporate energy procurement was supposed to become more unified as global markets matured and best practices standardized. What is actually happening is the opposite. Policy divergence between the US, Europe, and Asia Pacific is forcing multinationals to manage energy procurement as a collection of regional decisions rather than a coherent global strategy. And most organizations weren't built to do that. Global corporate clean energy procurement fell 10% in 2025, the first decline in nearly a decade, dropping to 55.9 gigawatts from a record the prior year, according to Bloomberg Nef's 1H 2026 Corporate Energy Market Outlook. That top-line number understates a more significant structural shift. The market is fracturing by region at the same time it is concentrating among a smaller group of buyers, and the two dynamics together are reshaping what a viable procurement strategy looks like for multinational organizations that don't have hyperscaler budgets. Technology giants Meta, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft accounted for 49% of all global corporate clean energy activity in 2025. For the rest of the corporate market, the picture was more difficult, and the difficulty was not uniform. It played out very differently depending on where organizations were trying to procure. How regional policy divergence is driving the split? Three distinct regulatory environments have emerged, each with different incentive structures, contract frameworks, and risk profiles, and none of them is well served by a procurement strategy built for another. In the United States, the passage of the 2025 Reconciliation Bill rolled back significant clean energy incentives, narrowed safe harbor provisions, and introduced foreign entity of concern restrictions that affect supply chains for solar and battery projects. Wholesale electricity prices surged in 2025, with year-on-year increases of 62% in New York, 60% in New England, and 45% in PJM. Corporate buyers in deregulated markets face a fundamentally different contracting environment than they did when most long-term energy strategies were set. Following the 2024 adoption of the EU electricity market design reform, member states began implementing key measures, including enhanced consumer protection provisions, support for long-term contracts for difference, CFDs, and the promotion of corporate power purchase agreements, PPAs, which were designed to reach full operational status to boost market resilience, with major deadlines occurring by 2026. The market moved to 15-minute day-ahead trading intervals in September 2025. Free carbon allocations for the industrial sector are decreasing from 2026 under the EU ETS. A proposed $117.1 billion Industrial Decarbonization Bank, IDB, is advancing. Eurochamber's 2026 survey found that 68% of European industrial midcaps reported direct margin deterioration linked to energy volatility, with industrial gas prices up 210% and electricity up 112% over the 2021 to 2025 period. The regulatory response is active and ongoing, but it is distinctly European in structure and does not translate to other markets. In Asia Pacific, corporate clean energy procurement volumes dropped to 6.9 gigawatts in 2025 from 10.7 gigawatts the prior year, driven primarily by slowdowns in India and South Korea. Japan is moving toward a more sophisticated corporate PPA framework, with carbon pricing beginning in fiscal 2026, while Malaysia remains dependent on regulatory support for market development. Bloomberg Nef describes the Asia-Pacific region as increasingly bifurcating between markets where corporate PPA adoption is becoming more sophisticated and markets where it is not. What a unified global strategy can no longer accomplish. A multinational organization that built a single global clean energy procurement framework around US-style virtual PPAs, carbon attribute certificates, and a centralized sustainability accounting methodology is now operating in at least three regulatory environments that handle each of those instruments differently. The contract structures that work in ERCOT don't work in Japan. The guarantees of origin that satisfy European sustainability reporting don't satisfy US SEC climate disclosure requirements on the same terms. The incentive economics in pre-OBBA U.S. markets don't exist in the same form post-reform. S&P Global's 2026 Energy Horizons analysis flagged this directly, noting the potential for fracturing of policies by key players and regions as a defining dynamic in 2026. The report documents a market moving toward shorter contract terms and stronger downside protections as extreme price swings become more visible, particularly in Europe, where PPA indices remain well below cost-based levels. What multinationals need to do differently? The organizations navigating this most effectively are doing two things that run against how most global procurement functions have historically operated. First, they are treating regional energy procurement as a specialized discipline with market-specific expertise, rather than a globally standardized process managed by a central team. Second, they are building regional procurement calendars that account for local regulatory cycles, contract renewal windows, and policy inflection points, rather than aligning all procurement decisions to a single global planning cycle. The practical implication for C-suite leaders is that the energy procurement function needs resources and decision authority at the regional level that it may not currently have. A procurement strategy for Europe in 2026 needs to account for EU ETS dynamics, the full implementation of the electricity market design reform, and the active policy response to the Gulf energy crisis. A strategy for Japan in 2026 needs to account for FIP scheme dynamics, the new carbon pricing framework, and the grid constraints limiting offshore PPA delivery. Neither of those is a variation on a global theme. They are distinct market situations that require distinct responses. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.